Hi, welcome to my video about how to change the Cambelt and water pump on a Rover 200, 214, 8 valve in this case, 16 valve quite similar, where the principles are pretty much the same. We're changing the water pump just because it's easy to do so while the Cambelt is removed and the engine is jacked up and the engine mount removed. Not in this case because it had to be removed. Just makes good sense. It's only about £50 for a kit including the water pump, so worth doing. This is the 8 valve and the 16 valves quite similar. We're just concentrating on removing the items at the moment, and the refitting is a straight reversal of the removal procedure.
My son's going to have a go at doing this particular job. He's never done a Cambelt before. Well, I've done plenty over 35 years, so I'm here to give him a hand. So I reckon if he can do it, then anyone can do it with some basic DIY skills. It's good to have a set of sockets, well, essential I would say, and just the confidence to have a go. The other useful thing, of course, is the Haynes manual, or something like it, workshop manual, instructions from the web, or you can just follow this video. We've got to turn the engine until the timing mark on the camshaft sprocket lines up with the top of the cylinder head, which here is marked where I'm pointing with a little screwdriver, a little tiny little plastic line. It's useful to have a camera to come down actually to see whether they're aligned, and here you see they're slightly misaligned. There, we've lined it up perfectly. The next job is to remove the auxiliary drive belt. You can see where the spanner is. There's a little hexagonal nut that allows you to turn the spanner clockwise to relieve the pressure on this belt. I think it needs to turn a bit more, but once that's turned enough, the tensioner will come down this way. It's obviously relieved enough, it's been done from the top. So managed to get it off from the power steering pump and off from the crankshaft. Yeah, that's worth changing at the same time because it was a bit cracked. So got the Cambelt cover off, got the auxiliary drive belt off, and we've got a jack underneath the sump of the engine there, so that we can jack up the engine slightly, because the next job is removing the engine mounts, which these things here, take all these bolts off, which have to be done before you can get the Cambelt off. Yeah. And the idea is to get the engine mount just centralised around the bolt. So about there, you can actually feel this piece of metal coming up and see it coming up with respect to the rubber. Try a little bit more. That'll do, I think. That's actually sticking up quite a lot now. So there's definitely the weight of the engine is on the jack. I'll just remove these two nuts and this bolt. Get the engine mount out of the way. Quite stiff, so you need a proper torque wrench. You'll see the auxiliary drive belt has been removed. The only tricky thing with taking the pressure off the drive belt is the tensioner, which we now see has gone a lot higher. Now the tricky thing is actually getting a spanner off the nut. You use your spanner to relieve the pressure from the tensioner. But once you remove the belt, the tensioner will try and go a lot higher, which means your spanner turns a lot. It's actually quite difficult to get off. So what we did is to jam a bar between the power steering pulley and the tensioner, with somebody pushing down on the tensioner so it's in its normal tension position. And as you relieve it, the bar stops the tensioner from coming up too much, and then that allows you to get the spanner off. Actually using the end of the big torque wrench to do that. So there's the two nuts for one part of the engine mount removed. Right, there's the bolt removed as well. Now hopefully the engine mount should come off. That's the engine mount removed. See, now we've got a gap between the engine and the chassis. so that we can actually get the cam belt off it. Next job is probably to remove this alternator belt. To remove the alternator drive belt, which isn't on a tensioner, we have to loosen up the bolts that mount the alternator, one of which is here. So to loosen that nut, and if we look around, see the bottom of the alternator, I have to go down to the bottom of the engine to see, is held by this nut over here. As you can see, it's in an adjustable slot. There's another nut there, or a bolt, might have to loosen up. Doing that, the alternator should then come back towards the engine, loosen up the tension on the alternator drive belt, and we should then be able to remove the alternator drive belt. The next job after the alternator drive belt is to remove the remainder of the engine mount. Can be done either before or after the alternator, and you can see it's held by 1, 2, and one at the bottom down there somewhere, one at the bottom bolts. Right, so that's the alternator moved out of the way. So we actually had to remove the top bolt, because I think what happened is the alternator was a little bit stuck onto the metal, so despite loosening up all the bolts around, it wouldn't move. So it's easier just to tap the bolt out, and we can then lever the alternator away from its mounting. So alternator drive belt's removed, and now there's nothing to stop us well, removing the engine mount is the next thing. The difficulty with removing the lower part of the engine mount is getting the bolts off. As you can see, the distance between the bolts and the bodywork is very short. So I think what will work is lower the engine to get the bottom bolt off, and then hopefully that will clear the bottom of the bodywork, and with the top one we'll jack up the engine, and hopefully we can get it above that piece of metal so we can get a socket in there. The spanners I don't think are strong enough, so we're going to try that next. So we'll try and raise the engine. We're jacking up the engine. Yeah, keep going. That'll probably be enough. You want to try that then? I should put it on the end of the torque wrench. That was enough to get the torque wrench in the socket. Leave that top one. Watch out for this power steering pipe here. It didn't try and break the plastic. Apply too much pressure on that. So now it's loosened off. We'll use a spanner to remove that. So to get that last bolt at the bottom of the engine mount, we actually had to jack the engine up even more rather than lower it, and also undo the 2 bolts that hold the power steering pipe in the way. See, that pipe is now loose. Hopefully the engine is high enough to get the socket on there. We may need to higher it even more. It's important to have a range of different socket sizes to get on that one. So here you can see how much we've had to jack up the engine in order to get to the bottom bolt of the lower engine mount, which you see is now removed. So one of the next awkward jobs is to remove the crankshaft pulley, which you need to remove in order to get this bottom plastic case off, and then to remove the belt. So here we see we've now lowered the engine, so we can actually get to the crankshaft pulley bolt head, and we get the bolt. Get a torque wrench and a socket on that, and try and undo it. So they're normally pretty tough, so I'll have to get a long torque wrench or a long power bar, and of course that will try and turn the engine and stop the engine turning. What we'll do is get an assistant to sit in the car, put the brakes on, and put it in gear. So to get sufficient movement on the torque wrench, you have to have some big extension. Right, so here you see our technique. Right, here you can see we removed the crankshaft pulley, and as soon as that is taken off, we're able to take the cam belt off, which has now been removed. Note we've made some white marks. Sorry, here we go, white mark on the camshaft pulley, and did a similar one on the crankshaft pulley down the bottom there, and marked it also on the cam belt. So I suggest putting the same white marks on the new cam belt, line it up from down here. There's new and old cam belts together, so you can line up the marks to make sure they're in the right position. You put the new belt on. The next job that's been done is to remove the water pump. So there's I think 5 or 6 bolts, I think 6 bolts in total left removed from the water pump.
Drain the coolant first.
This is the actual water pump, and the bolts go around the front. Yep, as has just been pointed out, you have to drain the coolant system first. So the bottom hose has been removed from the radiator in order to fully drain it. And there's one bolt around the back that needs to be removed, that's being done at the moment. And the remaining bolts on the front, and the whole water pump should then remove, and we can replace it with the new one. Here's the new one. So you see it has a flat face, and you'll have a new rubber gasket that goes in that slot around the water pump. That's the crankshaft pulley. Tensioner was also removed. That's the power steering drive belt tensioner. A little bit awkward to get to. I think was it 3 bolts on the end, Ben, or just the 2 on the power steering tensioner? 2. And oh, that's also the tensioner for the cam belt that's also been removed. Fairly straightforward. We skipped a little bit ahead in the instructions here. But most of it's fairly straightforward, just rather awkward to get to. So most of the awkward jobs have been done. Once the water pump is off, just a matter of refitting the new water pump and refitting the cam belt back, making sure the timing marks line up. So just to reiterate again, that timing mark, let's just refocus, timing mark on the camshaft sprocket, which we can see is this line here. We made a white arc, and that lines up with the top of the cylinder head, which you can just about see there. The little plastic mark, we zoom in a bit more, so you can see the plastic mark. So here a phone comes in handy. You see that hole in the cover for the cam belt tells you whether you're exactly opposite it by looking at how the hole changes as you move around. And you can see in that position when we're immediately over the timing mark, the 2 timing marks exactly line up. And when I'm not sure you can see there was a timing mark on the camshaft sprocket, but now we move the sprocket, you can't actually see it, but it was there when the cover was on. Alright, that's with the water pump removed. There's the new water pump ready to go on. Let's put this rubber gasket, on the underneath, in the groove underneath, which you can see goes all the way around the bottom there, before putting it back in place and doing the reverse of removal assembly.
So that's the end of the video portion of this movie. The reinstallation instructions, as I say, is reversal of what we've done so far. Couple of points to mention though. When reinserting the cam belt, don't forget to keep those white markings lined up. So you should have a marking on the new cam belt exactly in the same position as the old cam belt, which will line up with the camshaft sprocket, that's the top one, and also with the same marking on the crankshaft sprocket, that's the bottom one. It's very essential you get all those markings lined up. It's fully described in terms of where all the timing marks are in the Haynes manual if you want to go through that. It's not actually essential, as long as you don't turn the engine, it's not actually essential to have the sprockets lined up on the timing marks, as long as you don't move either of the sprockets and you have marked both of the sprockets against the old belt and against the new belt, and lined up against the new belt, because that basically ensures you've got it all in exactly the same position as when you took it off. When putting the cam belt tensioner back on again, insert it in the right position and just push it with your fingers against the belt. Then crank over or turn over the engine, obviously clockwise direction in the normal direction of motion, so that the right side of the belt as you're looking at the engine is pulled tight. Turn it over a good couple of turns, then slacken off your cam belt tensioner. That's the little wheel with a spring on it, and if necessary give a little push back into position against the belt to make sure that it is taking up all the slack on the belt, and then retighten the bolts for the tensioner. You can check to see whether your belt is tight enough. Later on when you come to running the engine, you can do so with the cam cover removed. We've still got access to the cam tensioner as well, and if the belt on the right hand side is flapping around a lot, it shows that it's got or hasn't got enough tension on it, and therefore the tensioner needs pushing in a little bit more. The other point to mention, quite important, is when you come to filling the engine back up with coolant again, use the OAT type of coolant. The pink stuff of coolant is the recommended one. There is a little bleed screw that is on the right hand side of the engine if you're standing at the front of the car looking at the engine. It's just underneath the distributor, and sometimes helps to take the top of the airbox off, and you'll see a little bolt screwed into the top of one of the coolant pipes that goes I think back onto the water pump. You'll see if you get down there. So particularly important to take that bolt out while you're filling up the engine with coolant from the expansion tank, and keep filling up till water comes out of that bleed point, that little bolt. To get the quickest bleeding, you just take the bolt out, and eventually you'll see water pouring out of it. And then when that happens, bolt it back up again. Then make sure it takes air out of the system. Otherwise, you can get an airlock, and it can be a problem with, of course, then overheating. So it's quite important you do bleed the system out. Right. Hopefully, the rest of the reassembly instructions are quite straightforward. We didn't bother videoing the rest of it in order to keep the video length down, and it's also quite inconvenient trying to video while doing the job, so it's slowing us down quite a lot. But we did successfully reinstall the cam belt, and it ran fine. The only little thing that we had, which I should also say to look out for, is there's a little piece of rubber that seals between the bottom and top half of the plastic cam cover that got slightly pushed out of shape or pushed out of place as we put the top cover on. Quite difficult to see because it's right down in the half of the engine, and that started rubbing against one of the wheels, made a funny noise, so we took the top cover off and had a look, and could quite easily find it. But apart from that, it all went fine, and the car's now running nicely. So thanks for watching. Bye.